Hello, welcome to Learn with Lorna, episode number 210. I'm really hoping this is going out because this is the third time that I've had to restart and try and get it to go out, so I have no idea why Facebook is playing games with me this morning, so apologies for being 5 minutes late starting. I promise you it's not my fault. So welcome to Learn with Lorna, episode 210. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn. I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service, which has 4 archive centres where we look after documents relating to this part of the world, documents from the 1200s all the way through to the present day in our centres in Inverness, Wick, Fort William and Portree. This series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland's a charity registered in Scotland and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we're very grateful for that. So again, if you're just joining me now, apologies for it starting slightly late. Facebook was playing all kinds of tricks on my system. Okay, so this week we are looking at women at work, and I'm going to say right from the outset that I mean women going out to work rather than women staying at home and the work involved in running a household and raising children. I am not denying that that is hard work, but I'm looking at women going out into the workplace. So we're going to look at some teachers, nurses, doctors. We have in our collections writers and secretaries, a lot about women's role in war work, and generally in breaking ground in different workplaces and environments. So I'm going to start by looking at some of the workplace roles that are perhaps most traditionally associated with women. We hold multiple records relating to nurses in the Highlands, both within our NHS Highland collections and beyond. This includes things like staffing registers and records, an extensive collection of photographs and photos of nursing badges. And these photographs and nursing badges are much loved by retired nurses. They always prompt a lot of memories, a lot of discussion from those who remained in the area and from those who trained here in the Highlands and then went elsewhere. But those photos of groups of nurses always prompt lots of discussion and memories. We're going to look at one nurse who made a substantial contribution to hospital care in the Highlands, and that's Elsie Philp. So let's have a little bit of a listen to her story from the records that we hold relating to the Royal Northern Infirmary. Born in Largo, Fife, Elsie C.R. Philp, the daughter of a corn merchant, trained at the Royal Infirmary, Edinburgh. She entered the Princess Christian's Army Nursing Service Reserve in February 1900, being posted almost immediately to South Africa, where she remained until the end of the hostilities. For this service, she was awarded both the King's and Queen's South African medals. Miss Philp was appointed matron of the Northern Infirmary on the 14th of April 1904 at a salary of £70 per annum with board, lodgings and washing. She had previously served as the assistant matron of the Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading and was described as having wide experience and being highly recommended. Must be a very substantial change to come from South Africa and the Boer War and then find yourself in Inverness. In July 1915, Miss Philp, who had remained a member of the Territorial Army Nursing Service, was informed that she was to be mobilised in order to take up her duties as matron at the No. 1 General Scottish Hospital in Aberdeen. She served with distinction in Aberdeen until 1919. Shortly after returning to the Northern Infirmary, it was announced that she had been awarded the Royal Red Cross. So that's her with the Royal Red Cross and the Queen's South African Medal and the King's South African Medal. Miss Philp resigned her post in August 1921 on account of increasing ill health. The directors expressed their high appreciation of the fidelity, ability and tact with which her duties had been discharged. So a substantial contribution, as I say. And many thousands of women have served as nurses across the Highlands. But we also have records of other medical professions. We hold, if you remember the episode on the fascinating McLean sisters, who had doctors and psychoanalysts and different medical professionalisms within the family. In Nucleus, we hold a copy of Amulets to Isotopes, A History of Medicine in Caithness by D.H.A. Boyd. And in it is the story of Dr. Helen Lilly Garrett. And this is her story. Dr. Helen Lilly Garrett, although born in Orkney in 1890, Helen Lilly spent her childhood at the manse, Wotton, where her father was minister, the family having Caithness connections going back to 1884. She qualified MBCHB at Aberdeen in 1914, thereafter gaining surgical experience in Sheffield. In 1915 she did a locum general practice in Latheron, where this young woman doctor so impressed that she was asked to stay, but said she was no so minded. Other more adventurous tasks were in her sights. She was one of that indomitable band of women who served with the Scottish Women's Hospitals, the SWH, in the 1418 war. In Serbia, she served under Dr. Bennett, who, having watched her operate, later wrote, "I felt that I had never seen a woman do an operation so deftly and so quickly." Despite the pressure of her surgical work, she found time to gather material for an ND thesis entitled Malaria with Special Reference to Cases Treated in Macedonia. Early in 1918, she arrived at the SWH at the Royaumont in France, where she again treated battle casualties coming straight off the front. After the war, she prepared herself for work overseas by taking the diploma in tropical medicine, and in 1920 she went to Dufferin Hospital in Calcutta and then to the Church of Scotland Mission Hospital in Sialkot in the Punjab. There she met and married the Reverend John Garrett. So, an extraordinary amount of experience and skill, and the Dufferin Hospital there I think is where one of the McLean sisters went to in Calcutta. So all of that contribution, and then the end of her story says, returning to Scotland after the Second World War and after her husband's death, she failed again to find medical work and became a librarian at Glasgow University Library. And I'm not in any way suggesting that being a librarian is not also very important, but it seemed that after all that experience, just a bit of it felt to me like a little bit of a waste that medical experience was lost. She died in 1977 at the age of 86. So we have nurses, we have doctors, but one of Caithness's most notable medical women was perhaps a midwife called Christian Cowper, and we hold a copy of her midwife's memorandum book from 1783 to 1843 in Nucleus. And here's a little bit about her, written by Donald Grant in a document held at Nucleus. Christian Cowper was a howdy, or a midwife, in Thurso and district, who left a comprehensive and detailed record of her engagements. The first entry is dated June 1786, and the last 22nd of March 1843, a period of service of 57 years. In that time, she helped to bring 2,051 boys and 1,897 girls into the world, a remarkable total of nearly 4,000 children. There were many instances of twins, but only one of triplets on 6th of October 1788, when 3 boys were born to Mrs. Murray, North Calder. Usually, the father's occupation was entered, except for the top layer of local society, where she managed in her own way to indicate the father's social status. For the lowest layer, she had little respect, and when the mother was unmarried, that was stated only too clearly. She had a special vocabulary for those unfortunates. Where a nickname was known, she inserted this also. We read of Betty Swanson, alias Gutterag, Kitty Mackay, alias Humpet Kitty, and Mrs. Dowell, alias Dryhill. An entry dated on the 6th of September 1820 tells us simply, to a tinker, a boy. Another, on the 16th of September 1799, announces the birth of a boy to Mr. Macquarie, play actor. Interesting that it's born to Mr. Macquarie. It is very unlikely that Christian Cowper was the only howdy in Thurso, but with a yearly average of 69 children over a period of 57 years, she evidently had her full share of deliveries. And we also hold at the Highland Archive Centre in Inverness a fantastic manual, and I definitely have mentioned this before, I'm sure, a manual of midwifery handwritten from 1768 I know it would be handwritten from 1768, but I mean it is the original, which includes descriptions of the body, changes to the body during pregnancy, the process of labour and delivery, potential postnatal diseases, things that can beset the mother, all sorts of different things. Really, really interesting document. Another job that has often been associated traditionally with women is teaching, and I wanted to share the story as seen in our school files for the County of Inverness of Annie Barron. Annie Barron struck me as I was kind of looking through the hundreds and hundreds of people's stories in these folders as a really incredible woman. Annie Barron's application form was received by the Inverness County Education Authority in September 1930. It shows that she was born on the 6th of June 1904 and educated at Inverness Royal Academy from 1919 to 1922. And as always, I find it fascinating to see the subjects that those at the Academy were doing. And she was educated in English, French, Latin, Greek, maths and analytical geometry. She then went on to get a first-class honours degree in classics at Aberdeen University, and she studied there Latin, Greek, maths, logic and zoology. Annie Barron then did a year's training at Aberdeen Training Centre and went on to gain special qualifications in teaching Latin and Greek. So we can see a pattern here. She's leaning towards the classics, but also on her form it notes that she's also capable of teaching music and hockey. And as I've said before, I just find that amazing that I am very much a words person. Science is absolutely an unknown to me. Science, maths I'm not great with, very much a words and history person. But I always find it fascinating looking at these, the breadth of skill that some people achieve. And when I looked at her accompanying documents, those things that she had put with her application form, I can find a little bit more. It goes on to say that when she was at IRA, Inverness Royal Academy, she gained the Dux Gold Medal in Classics, so the overall Dux Gold Medal, then the Dux Gold in Classics, a Dux Medal in Maths, a Dux Medal in English as well. And her prize-winning status continued. At university, she won several special prizes, and also the Simpson Greek Prize, the Robbie Gold Medal in Greek, the Seafield Gold Medal in Latin. She was first in her examination for the Dr. Black Prize in Latin, and then on leaving the training centre, she was second place in the McGregor Prize offered to the best outgoing teacher. So you see what I mean, she seems completely extraordinary. At the time of writing her application, sorry, I know I keep touching my head, I've still not fully recovered from being ill, so forgive me. At the time of writing this application to the Inverness County Authority, she was working as assistant in classics at Madras College, St Andrews, and her reference from the headmaster there reads like this. Her very distinguished career at university is ample guarantee of the excellence of her scholarship. So no one is doubting that she's incredibly clever. However, he goes on to add, I am glad to say that she also has qualities that will ensure steady success in teaching. So not only is she very intelligent in her subject, but she will be capable of teaching and sharing that subject. She is a hard and methodical worker with a high ideal of thoroughness, and she grudges no trouble that will advance the interests of her pupils. Moreover, she shows judgment in discerning the essentials, and what is somewhat rare in a young teacher, she shows great patience and persistence in securing proper attention to those essentials. She handles her classes very well, and a quiet diligence in her pupils attend her orderly governance. Really lovely comments. And this is another one. All of her references are glowing, and I could have read any of them, but this is another one. This is from the Greek professor at Aberdeen University. I have much pleasure in being able to testify to the high opinion that I have formed of the ability and attainments of Miss Annie Barron, M.A. During her curriculum, she was a highly distinguished student in the Greek and Latin classes, and proved herself the best in both subjects in the classical honours examination, where she gained the highest awards offered by the university. This is one that a sentence I really love, and I think is a huge compliment to a teacher. She has great power of mastering a subject and of presenting it with clearness and accuracy. Her manner is all that could be desired, and I feel justified in the expectation that she will prove a most successful teacher of classics in a secondary school. What I was really struck about when I was reading these was the genuine admiration from all these academic men writing about her. The rector of Inverness Royal Academy said the high academical distinctions which have fallen to her are thoroughly well deserved. So there's no kind of patronising comment in there. It's about they're genuinely impressed at her ability, her scholarship, her intelligence. But it looks, however, that, like Annie Barron, did not find a job back home in Inverness, because I found in an article in the British Newspaper Archive from 1943, it stated that after 16 years' brilliant service, she was leaving St Andrews Madras College to go on to Morgan Academy in Dundee. And it says, an enthusiastic and popular teacher whose leaving is much regretted. I had a very quick look online just to see. I didn't do a deep dive into her life, but I had a quick look, and I found that Annie Barron, who was then Annie Ramsay, she had married William Ramsay, died in 1990. So it's possible that if this film gets to the right people, they will remember Annie Barron. I wondered whether she carried on teaching after getting married. I didn't look into that, but certainly that, as we've spoken about before, is something that would have been a barrier for quite a lot of people, and it was a barrier for Elizabeth Allen. She wrote this letter to the Inverness County Education Authority in 1930. Mr Conacher, the Director of Angus Education, advised me to write to you, re any vacancies or possible vacancies that you might have in your single teacher or two teacher schools where a house is available. I apologise for the intruding on your valuable time, but circumstances have so persistently militated against us that my entering the profession again is an absolute necessity. That in itself is no hardship, since I love teaching and all that it entails. To detail all the adverse fortune that has befallen us would encroach far too considerably on your time, but you are entitled to the main facts. In the autumn of 1926, I gave up teaching to look after my invalid mother, a widow, who died in July 1928. To make a life and to make a home, I married a mining engineer, a student of Glasgow University who was working for his Home Office examination. Unfortunately, while doing his practical work underground, and possibly as a result of the war, his health gave way, compelling him to follow an outdoor occupation. I spoke about this a few weeks ago, the impact of the war, and then him coming out of the First World War and going into a job that involves being underground. You can see that having being connected, and the implications that this has for the whole family. So she then says, we put all of our savings into a fruit and vegetable business connected with shipping in Methil. Again, ill luck dogged us, and the effect of the general strike and then the strike itself forced us to close down in April last year with nothing left to our account. I had obtained a post under Forfarshire Authority, but unfortunately in some respects I had to resign last autumn. I have enclosed a few testimonials and have others, although not of recent work because she hasn't been doing any recent work, but they are available if you desire to see them. Dr. Rush of Jordan Hill thought I should mention the fact that I had received a very satisfactory HMI report last year as a result of my endeavours while teaching at a single teacher school in Angus. However, Mr. Conacher has kindly consented to stand as reference and will be pleased to answer any queries, and also so will Mr. Allardyce, Director of Glasgow Education, to whom reference may be made. I would like to state further that my husband has steadily done his utmost to obtain work of any description in any likely quarter, but all to no purpose, and since he himself was an employer, it is understood that he receives no relief monies, and nor do I get any such. In reality, we are nearing our very last penny. May I hope for your courteous consideration of this seemingly untoward application. Should you deem any interview necessary, I would be only too grateful to oblige. And you really get the sense there of the desperation of the situation, that one thing after another has hit them, with the illness of her mother, with her husband's health breakdown, with the taking on this business, which then has collapsed because of the strike, and that letter of just going, just please, please, please help me. But despite all of her qualifications, and interestingly enough, her qualifications were unusual because she also had studied journalism and various other things in her references. And again, she had glowing references from all sorts of people. But the letter came back quite bluntly stating that the bar on employing married women prevented them from employing her. Now, I also found some information in the school files about someone who was never a teacher. This is Minnie Mackay. Now, she wrote to the Education Authority in 1929. She was from Helmsdale in Sutherland, and she wrote to the Inverness Education Authority to say that she had heard there was a vacancy for a teacher of commercial subjects in Portree, for which she wanted to apply, but she had no teaching qualification. I found her letter really interesting because, despite not being a teacher, she was clearly well versed and well experienced in the business world, as her qualifications and her references show. Minnie Mackay got her MA in Glasgow, and again, moving a little bit away now from the classics and zoology and analytical geometry, Minnie Mackay's qualifications were in political philosophy, moral philosophy, political economy. She then went on to Glasgow in the west of Scotland Commercial College, where she did shorthand and typing, but also bookkeeping, commercial arithmetic, Spanish and business methods. And then she went from there onto the Glasgow School of Social Studies and Training for a diploma in a whole range of subjects, including social ethics, industrial legislation, economic theory, statistics and public administration. So really interesting just to look at. I mean, it doesn't surprise me because it's the same today. We all have different skills and strengths, but that focus that she's got right from an early age onto economy and how to run a business, industrial studies, what's happening within the economy. And like Annie Barron, the teacher, Minnie Mackay won multiple prizes and accolades both at school and beyond. Her references describe her as distinguished in the excellence of her written work and her zeal and ability, taking first place in nearly all of her examinations. And she followed this theoretical training with practical experience, as references from sales managers and general managers state, including a letter from William Regan, manager of Hoxton and Walsh, who described Minnie Mackay's role as the secretary to the manager of the firm. He says she handles correspondence, most of which was just entrusted entirely to her without dictation. She contributed to the weekly newspaper, she kept all the financial records for the business, completed reports, and did the interviewing of most of the staff. He says, in short, she is an intelligent, industrious and obliging assistant. The Director of Education wrote back to Minnie Mackay to say that he was absolutely sure he could get her a post in commercial teaching if she would take her teaching qualification. And he said, I strongly recommend you to do it because we should be able to find a vacancy for you with all your experience. But Minnie wasn't sure about that, and she wrote back to say that she would need to think about it. But she says, there aren't many vacancies for graduates in the business world. I'll need to think about what my next move is. And she eventually wrote a letter that said, Dear Mr. Morrison, I have definitely decided not to go in for the teaching course for commercial subjects. I have given up my post in Glasgow and I'm going to London on Wednesday, as there seemed to be more scope in secretarial work there than in the north. I'm sorry to give up the idea so definitely, but I have spent so much of my time in training of various forms that I just do not feel justified in spending any more time on another course. I should like to thank you very much for your kindness and assistance, all the more because my decision may now seem somewhat ungrateful, with very many thanks. And what was interesting about that, I thought, was that he wrote back to her and said, please keep me informed about your future work in progress. I would be interested to see what you go on to do, which is interesting. She struck me as someone who was maybe just clever in a field that didn't yet have the space for her. In 1964, Margaret Reid was able to push past that. Miss Reid, who was from Thurso, where she began her career, became Scotland's first female bank manager. She ran the ladies' branch of the National Commercial Bank of Scotland in Edinburgh's Princes Street, a branch that was exclusively for lady customers, which I found really interesting. Margaret Reid had completed all the examinations of the Institute of Bankers in Scotland, becoming an associate of the Institution of Bankers, and had wide experience of branch banking, which would stand her in good stead for running this branch in Edinburgh. And Caithness carried on breaking ground again a few years later with Margaret Rose Manson, who became the first woman auxiliary of the Scrabster Coast Guard, with responsibility for scanning the northern waters for signs and signals of distress. It's all happening in Caithness. Now, of course, one of the big things that made a huge difference to women in the workplace and laid the foundations for those changes that would come in the 50s, 60s and 70s was the role of women in World War I and World War II. In both wars, there were multiple opportunities given to and seized by women for the first time. I've spoken before about wonderful Hetty Munro and her amazing war service, the role that women played in the Rose Street Foundry, that physical, practical, hard work, the McLean sisters' work, including in the Ministry of Information, all sorts of things. And we hold documents that show women training as ambulance drivers, working in the Land Army, taking the roles left vacant when men went off by necessity to fight in the war. So we held a document that is entitled, I can't think of the exact title off my head, but it's something like roles in which women may be substituted for men. And these include roles like meter reading, working in the gasworks, public transport drivers and conductors. And I read a quote in it that said, apparently they were rolling out a trial scheme in Glasgow where they would have women tram drivers. And they note in this booklet that, to their great surprise, the women were as cool and confident as the most experienced motormen. And the general opinion is that they are doing remarkably well, even in busy traffic. I want to finish with a document that talks about another role that women undertook in wartime, World War I in this case. This is from the Honorary Secretary of the Scottish Training School for Policewomen and Patrols. And it reads like this. Sorry, I've just zoomed right out of it and made it really tiny, but I have now sorted it. 26th of October 1918. Dear Sir, I should be grateful if you will lay before the appropriate committee of the Association of County Councils the request of my committee that the question of women in police work and their training should be considered by the association. I enclose papers with this. From these you will see that from the beginning of the war, the Home Office, the Scottish Office, the War Office and the Admiralty authorised the National Union of Women's Workers, the union of practically all women's societies, to organise voluntary women's patrols. These patrols have acted for over 4 years now, and it is from first-hand experience gained in such work that my committee have felt the need of whole-time and trained women to act under the police authorities as part of the force. There have been 2 training schools in England which also arose out of the work of these voluntary patrols, and these have been very successful. That at Bristol, supplying workers for the provinces, that in London, which is run practically under the supervision of the Commissioner of Police, training the police aides, whom he so largely uses in street and park work. But Scotland has different conditions, as well as different administrations, and my committee has opened a training school in Glasgow at 13 Newton Place under Miss Edith Tancred, who has been especially trained at both Bristol and London. At this school, it is hoped to sift out and train suitable women for this work, and also to take any trainees who may be sent for preliminary training by local authorities. The training is thorough, but it is quite definitely preliminary, leaving the detailed work to be done by each Chief Constable along his own lines. I left a syllabus of the training with you, and I might add that this scheme was submitted to the Chief Constables of Edinburgh and Glasgow and was approved by them. While my committee recognises that the inclusion of women in the regular police force in some capacity or another, as the circumstances dictate, is a matter which must be judged by each locality. Yet, they venture to request that the general principle should be brought forward for sympathetic consideration, and that along with this, it should be noted that facilities for training are now afforded by the Scottish National Training School. I believe that the first paid woman police officer in Scotland was Jean Thompson, who was appointed in Dundee in 1918, so potentially off the back of this or connected to this push. But by 1928, 10 years on, there were still only 16 policewomen in Scotland, mostly in Glasgow. Apart from during World War II, where there was a brief kind of respite on it, women had to resign from the force when they married, and this remained the rule in Scotland until 1968. They also had to leave if they became pregnant, and that rule remained in place until 1973. So, changes, gradual changes, but always with more to do. I am going to stop there because we've hit half an hour. I am aware that I haven't looked at domestic service, I haven't looked at the herring girls, many other jobs and roles, and particularly some of the more practical. As I was reading that, I thought I've got quite a lot there on educated women, but I think it's quite good to shine a light on some of them. But I have an episode coming up looking at the herring girls, and I think I'll put one in about domestic service as well. So perhaps women in the workplace is a subject we will revisit. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed that. Apologies again for starting late. I had 3 failed attempts to start, and yes, fun and games. I hope you can join me next week. We'll be looking at local worthies and colourful characters from across the Highlands. And a reminder that this series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland's a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part. But if you're able to donate towards our work, we are very grateful for that. And I will attempt to be headache free and cough free and sore throat free by next week. Although I have been hoping that for the last 4 weeks. Thank you very much for your time.